The coffee shop was quiet that morning. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat, that makes the clink of spoons against ceramic cups sound like church bells. I'd been working there for 6 months, long enough to know the regulars, short enough to still be invisible, and that's how I liked it. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant surviving. My fingers were raw from the scalding water I'd been using to wash mugs for the past hour. The skin around my nails had begun to peel, but I barely noticed anymore. Physical discomfort had become background noise in my life, like the hum of the refrigerator or the occasional car passing outside the window of my studio apartment. "Lena, table 7 needs clearing," Marco, my manager, called from behind the counter. I nodded, tucking a strand of dark hair behind my ear before grabbing a tray. Table 7 was in the corner, partially hidden behind a decorative bookshelf. The table no one wanted unless they were trying to avoid being seen. As I approached, I registered the remnants of what looked like an important meeting. Scattered papers hastily gathered, coffee cups half empty, a laptop closed but still warm, and a scent. Something expensive. Not cologne exactly, but the smell of someone who wore custom suits and probably had never worried about making rent. That's when I first saw him. Not directly, just his back as he stood outside on the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear. Broad shoulders beneath a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my salary. Dark hair, precision cut. Even from behind, he radiated the kind of authority that made people step out of his way on the street without even realizing they were doing it. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, one checking his surroundings with practiced vigilance, the other holding open the door of a sleek black Mercedes that had silently appeared at the curb. I gathered the cups onto my tray, my movements automatic while my eyes stayed fixed on the scene outside the window. Something about it felt wrong. The way the men moved, perhaps. Too coordinated. Too aware. Like predators. "Excuse me, miss." I nearly jumped out of my skin. A woman in a pencil skirt stood beside me, designer handbag clutched to her chest like a shield. "I think someone left this under the table." She held out a small leather-bound notebook. "Thanks. I'll put it in lost and found," I said, taking it from her. The woman nodded and left, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I flipped the notebook open, telling myself I was just checking for identification. There was none. Just pages of numbers and initials that made no sense to me. But on the last used page, a single name was circled repeatedly. Alessio Vitale. I didn't recognize it, but something about the frantic circles around it made my pulse quicken. I slipped the notebook into my apron pocket without thinking, a moment of foolishness that would alter the course of my entire life. When I looked back out the window, the man in the suit had turned. His profile was sharp, strong jaw, straight nose, lips pressed into a hard line as he continued his phone conversation. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his expression was thunderous. Then, as if sensing my gaze, he turned fully toward the coffee shop. Our eyes met through the glass, and everything seemed to stop. His were dark, almost black, and they locked onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath. It lasted only a second before his associate leaned in to whisper something in his ear, breaking the connection. The man nodded sharply and moved toward the waiting car. I watched, tray still in hand, as he reached for the door handle. That's when I noticed it, a red dot dancing across his back. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My body moved before my mind could process what was happening. The tray clattered to the floor. I pushed through the door and ran onto the sidewalk. "Look out!" I screamed. But my voice was lost in the noise of the street. Time slowed. I crossed the distance between us in what felt like minutes rather than seconds. I saw his security team turn, confusion morphing into alarm. I saw the man himself begin to pivot, his expression changing from irritation to something unreadable. My hands connected with the expensive fabric of his suit, and I pushed with all my strength. He was solid, immovable as stone. But the surprise of my attack caught him off guard. We both went down. My body sprawled awkwardly over his on the cold concrete. And then the world exploded. Heat and sound washed over us in a violent wave. The force of it pressed me harder against the stranger beneath me. Glass rained down, tinkling like deadly wind chimes. The smell of burning metal and plastic filled the air, acrid and thick. For a moment, Everything went dark. When my vision cleared, the Mercedes was engulfed in flames. People were screaming, running. Sirens wailed in the distance. "Get her up." The voice came from somewhere above me, urgent but controlled. Hands gripped my arms, hauling me to my feet with bruising force. My legs wobbled, threatening to give way, but the hands held me upright. "Are you hurt?" A different voice, deeper, accented. It came from the man I had tackled, the man who should have been in that car. I tried to focus on his face, but my vision swam. No, I don't think so." His eyes narrowed, studying me with a calculation that made my skin prickle. "What did you see?" "A red dot," I managed. "On your back." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or suspicion. Before he could respond, one of his men leaned in close. "Police are coming, sir. We need to move." The man, Alessio Vitale, I was now certain, nodded once. "Bring her," he commanded, and then turned away, already moving toward a second vehicle that had appeared as if by magic. "Wait, what?" I tried to pull away, but the grip on my arms tightened. "I need to stay. I have to talk to the police." The man holding me leaned down, his breath hot against my ear. "That's not an option. You just saved the boss's life. He wants to thank you personally. I have a shift." The absurdity of my protest hit me even as the words left my mouth. There had just been an explosion. Someone had tried to murder this man, and I was worried about my minimum wage job. "Your shift is over," said the guard, propelling me toward a black SUV with tinted windows. I dug my heels in. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't even know who you are." The guard stopped, an almost pitying look crossing his face. "You put yourself in his path. You touched him. You know his face. Your choices disappeared the moment you pushed him to the ground." Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through me. "I saved his life," I whispered. "Yes," the guard agreed. "And now your life belongs to him." Before I could process what that meant, I was ushered into the back of the SUV. The door closed with a soft, expensive-sounding thud that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. The interior smelled of leather and something else, that same expensive scent I'd noticed earlier. Alessio Vitale sat across from me, his phone already to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. Despite having been thrown to the ground moments before, he looked immaculate, not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in his suit. Only a small cut above his eyebrow, beading with blood, gave any indication that something had happened. The SUV pulled smoothly into traffic, leaving behind the chaos and flames. I turned to look out the window, watching as the coffee shop, my safe, predictable life, disappeared from view. Marco would wonder where I'd gone. My landlord would wonder why my rent was late. No one else would notice I was missing. Your name. It wasn't a question, but a demand. I turned back to find Alessio watching me. His phone now tucked away. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Early 40s, perhaps, with threads of silver at his temples that only enhanced his authority rather than diminishing it. "Lena," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "Lena Reyes. Do you know who I am, Lena Reyes?" I hesitated, then reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the notebook. Alessio Vitale. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the car seemed to drop by several degrees. He held out his hand, and I placed the notebook in it without resistance. "Where did you get this?" His voice was soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Someone left it under the table. A woman gave it to me right before." I gestured vaguely, unable to put the explosion into words. "And you decided to keep it instead of turning it in." It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. We both knew I had made a terrible mistake. He flipped through the notebook, his face unreadable. Finally, he closed it and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "The red dot you saw. Tell me exactly what happened." I swallowed hard. "You were about to get into your car. I noticed a red dot moving across your back. I watch a lot of crime shows. I knew what it was. A laser sight," he supplied. "And your first instinct was to risk your life for a complete stranger?" Put that way, it did seem insane. I didn't think. I just reacted. He studied me with those dark, penetrating eyes. Most people would have frozen or run away. I didn't know how to respond to that. I'd always been the type to run toward danger rather than away from it, a quality that had gotten me into trouble more than once. It was the same impulsiveness that had led me to flee my hometown after my mother's death, to try to outrun the suffocating grief that threatened to consume me. "Where are you taking me?" I asked finally. "Somewhere safe. I was safe before." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Were you? A woman who runs toward gunfire and steals notebooks from my business associates? I think you and I have very different definitions of safety, Lena Reyes." The way he said my name, like he was committing it to memory, sent a shiver down my spine. "I want to go home." "That's not possible right now. You can't just kidnap me." His eyebrow arched. "Is that what this is? I recall you pushing me to the ground and then being escorted into my car for your own protection after saving my life. The police might view the situation differently than you do." The implication was clear, his word against mine, and his word carried weight that mine never would. "What do you want from me?" I asked, hating the tremor that had crept into my voice. "For now, information." He leaned forward slightly. "Who knew you would be working today? Who have you spoken to about your job? Who would know your routine?" "No one," I said, confused. "I don't really have friends here. I just moved to the city 8 months ago." "Family?" "None left." The words came out flatter than I intended. Something shifted in his gaze, not softening exactly, but a recognition of something familiar. "So you're alone in the world." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Then your disappearance won't cause problems." My heart slammed against my ribs. "My disappearance? You said you were taking me somewhere safe." "And I am." He sat back, straightening the cuffs of his shirt with precise movements. "But until I know who targeted me and whether they saw you interfere, you're a liability. And I don't leave liabilities wandering freely around my city. Your city," I repeated, a hysterical laugh threatening to bubble up. "Of course. You're not just some businessman, are you?" His expression remained impassive, but there was something almost like amusement in his eyes. "What do you think I am, Lena?" I thought of the security detail, the multiple cars, the way he commanded rather than asked, the casual reference to me as a liability, the notebook full of numbers that meant nothing to me, but clearly meant something to him. "I think," I said carefully, "that I should have let you get into that car." This time he did smile, a cold, dangerous curve of his lips that never reached his eyes. "No, you don't, because despite your recklessness, you strike me as a survivor, and survivors have excellent instincts." The SUV slowed, turning into an underground parking garage. I watched as we descended floor by floor, deeper beneath the city. "We've arrived," Alessio announced as the vehicle came to a stop. "Where exactly is here?" "One of my properties. You'll stay until I determine it's safe for you to leave." "And how long will that be?" He opened his door, pausing to look back at me with those unfathomable eyes. "That depends entirely on you, Lena Reyes, and on whether the person who tried to kill me today decides to try again." As the door opened, I caught a glimpse of more men in suits, waiting like sentinels in the dimly lit garage. The reality of my situation crashed down on me with crushing force. In saving Alessio Vitale's life, I had irrevocably entangled myself with a man who was clearly dangerous, powerful, and now, because of me, hunted. Worse still, I'd brought something valuable and secret into his orbit, that innocent-looking notebook that I should have left alone. I stepped out of the SUV on shaky legs, wondering if I'd traded one death for another, more prolonged one. But as Alessio's hand came to rest at the small of my back, guiding me toward an elevator, I couldn't deny the electric current that shot through me at his touch. Whatever fate awaited me, there was no going back to the quiet, invisible life I'd been living. For better or worse, Alessio Vitale now had my full attention, and I had his. The elevator ascended silently, the only indication of our movement, a subtle pressure change in my ears. I stood rigid beside Alessio, acutely aware of his proximity and the warmth radiating from his body. 2 guards flanked us, their expressions impassive, eyes fixed straight ahead. "You're trembling," Alessio observed quietly. I hadn't noticed, but he was right. A fine tremor had taken hold of my limbs. Delayed shock, perhaps, or simply fear of my uncertain future. Almost being blown up will do that to you, I replied, trying to inject some defiance into my voice. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. Most people would be more than trembling after what you experienced. They'd be falling apart. I didn't tell him that falling apart was a luxury I hadn't been able to afford for a long time. Instead, I stared at the elevator doors, counting the seconds until they opened. When they finally did, I stepped into a world that seemed impossibly removed from the coffee shop where I'd started my morning. The penthouse spread before us was all gleaming marble, floor-to-ceiling windows, and sleek modern furniture. The city sprawled below, buildings reflecting the midday sun like scattered jewels. Impressive, I murmured, unable to help myself. It serves its purpose, Alessio replied dismissively, as though the multi-million-dollar apartment was merely functional rather than extravagant. He moved through the space with practiced ease, removing his jacket and draping it carefully over a chair. The action revealed a shoulder holster containing a matte black handgun, a stark reminder of who exactly I was dealing with. Antonio. He addressed one of the guards. Find Ms. Reyes something suitable to wear. And have Elena bring up the first aid kit. The guard nodded and disappeared down a hallway. First aid? I echoed, confused until Alessio gestured toward my hands. I looked down to find my palms scraped raw from the fall to the concrete, bits of gravel still embedded in the skin. In the chaos, I hadn't even noticed. Sit, he commanded, pointing to one of the pristine white sofas. I hesitated, suddenly conscious of my coffee-stained uniform and the blood on my hands. I'll ruin your furniture. This time the smile reached his eyes, a flash of genuine amusement. I assure you I can afford another sofa if necessary. Reluctantly, I perched on the edge of the cushion. Alessio disappeared momentarily, returning with a crystal tumbler half filled with amber liquid. Drink this, he said, pressing it into my hand. It will help with the shock. The whiskey burned a trail down my throat, warming me from the inside out. I took another sip, then set the glass on the coffee table. Thank you, I said automatically, then immediately felt foolish for thanking my captor for alcohol. A woman appeared, Elena, presumably, carrying a silver case. She set it on the table and opened it to reveal an array of medical supplies that looked more professional than what I'd expect in a typical home first aid kit. I'll take care of it, Alessio said, dismissing her with a nod. When we were alone again, he sat beside me and took one of my hands in his. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he examined the damage. This might sting, he warned, before cleaning the wounds with an antiseptic wipe. I bit my lip to keep from wincing. Do you often tend to your prisoner's injuries personally? He looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine. Is that what you are? A prisoner? You tell me. Can I leave if I want to? No, he said simply, returning his attention to my hand. But that doesn't make you a prisoner. It makes you a guest with limited options. A captive, then. A protected witness, he countered smoothly. Someone who saw something they shouldn't have and now needs to be kept safe. Safe from whom? The person who tried to kill you? Or you yourself? His hand stilled. Do you think I would harm someone who saved my life? I studied his face, the sharp angles, the controlled expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. I think you're the kind of man who does whatever is necessary to protect his interests. And right now, I don't know if I'm an asset or a liability in your calculation. Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. Perceptive, he murmured, resuming his ministrations. But incomplete. I am indeed a man who protects his interests. And you, Lena Reyes, became one of my interests the moment you pushed me out of the path of a bullet. Because I saved you? Because you were willing to die for a stranger. He finished bandaging my first hand and moved to the second. That kind of selflessness is rare. Rarer still in my world. Your world, I repeated. And what world is that exactly? Are you going to tell me? Or do I have to keep pretending I don't know what's happening here? Alessio was silent for a long moment, his focus seemingly on the task of removing tiny bits of gravel from my palm with a pair of tweezers. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, deliberate. My family has controlled certain aspects of this city's economy for 3 generations. We provide services, ensure stability, and protect those under our care. You're a crime family, I said bluntly. A mafia boss. His lips curved into that not-quite smile again. So American, with your Hollywood terminology, but yes, if it helps you to think of it that way. Fear and something else, something I was reluctant to name, twisted in my stomach. And the person who tried to kill you? A business rival, most likely, or perhaps someone within my own organization who's grown ambitious. Hence the trust issues. Hence the caution, he corrected, applying antiseptic to my second hand. Trust is earned, not given freely. And how exactly am I supposed to earn your trust while being kept here against my will? He finished bandaging my hand, but didn't release it immediately. His thumb traced a light circle on my wrist, just above the bandage. The casual intimacy of the gesture made my breath catch. By being honest with me, he said, his eyes intent on mine. By understanding that your survival is now inextricably linked with mine. And by accepting that, for the foreseeable future, your old life is gone. The weight of his words pressed down on me. My apartment with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating, my job with its predictable rhythm and anonymity, the simple, lonely existence I'd built for myself after escaping the suffocating small town where I'd grown up. All of it, gone in an instant. For how long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Until I find who's responsible for the attempt on my life. Until I'm certain you're not in danger for your role in saving me. And if I refuse? If I walk out of here right now? His expression hardened. Then I cannot guarantee your safety. Whoever targeted me saw what you did. They know your face. They know you interfered. Do you think they'll simply let that go? Before I could respond, Antonio returned with a stack of clothing. He placed it on a nearby chair and departed without a word. Alessio finally released my hand and stood. You should change. Those clothes are... His gaze swept over my coffee-stained uniform with a hint of distaste. Not up to your standards, I finished for him, a flash of irritation cutting through my fear. Sorry if almost dying made me a bit messy. To my surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features. You have spirit, Lena Reyes. I admire that. But I was going to say those clothes are evidence of what happened. They need to be disposed of properly. He gestured toward a hallway. The bathroom is the second door on the right. Change, and then we'll discuss what happens next. I gathered the clothes and headed in the direction he indicated, feeling his eyes on me until I was out of sight. The bathroom was as opulent as the rest of the penthouse, marble and glass and gold fixtures. I caught sight of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. My dark hair had escaped its neat ponytail, tangling around my face in wild waves. There was a smudge of soot on my cheek and a small cut above my eyebrow that I hadn't noticed before. My uniform was torn at the shoulder and stained with what I now realized was both coffee and blood. I looked like a survivor, battered but unbroken. The thought was strangely empowering. I stripped off the ruined clothes and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the physical remnants of the morning's chaos. My mind, however, remained in turmoil. What had I stumbled into? And more importantly, how would I find my way out? The clothing Antonio had provided fit surprisingly well: dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, and even undergarments still in their packaging. I tried not to think about how they had determined my size so accurately. When I emerged from the bathroom, Alessio was standing by the windows, phone in hand. He ended his call when he saw me. Better? He asked, his gaze traveling over me in a way that was both assessing and appreciative. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Thank you for the clothes. You look more yourself, he observed. You don't know what myself looks like, I countered. You don't know me at all. I know more than you might think. He moved to a sleek desk in the corner and picked up a tablet. Carolina Lena Reyes, 28 years old, originally from Ashford, Connecticut. Only child of Maria Reyes, deceased 3 years ago from cancer. No other family. Bachelor's degree in literature from State. Worked a series of temporary jobs before settling in this city 8 months ago. No criminal record, no social media presence, minimal digital footprint overall. My mouth went dry. You had me investigated? In the time it took me to shower, I make it a point to know who is in my home. He set the tablet down. You're something of a ghost, Lena. A woman deliberately trying not to be found. Maybe I just value my privacy. Or maybe you're running from something, or someone. The accuracy of his assessment unnerved me. I had been running, from memories, from the suffocating sympathy of a small town where everyone knew my business, from the emptiness of a life without my mother in it. Not everyone who values solitude is hiding, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Alessio studied me for a long moment, as if trying to decrypt a complex code. Perhaps. But you strike me as someone with shadows in her past. I recognized the type. I didn't respond. What could I say? That he was right? That I'd spent the past 3 years trying to outrun grief that followed me like a faithful shadow? That I'd changed cities 4 times, changed jobs 6 times, all in an effort to find somewhere. Something that didn't remind me of what I'd lost? Are you hungry? He asked suddenly, changing tactics. The question was so normal, so mundane, that it caught me off guard. I realized with surprise that despite everything, I was ravenous. Yes, actually. He nodded and pressed a button on his phone. Have lunch prepared for 2, he instructed someone on the other end. As he returned the phone to his pocket, a thought occurred to me. The notebook, I said, the one I found. What was in it? His expression closed off immediately. Nothing that concerns you. It concerns me if it's the reason someone tried to kill you, if it's the reason I'm now trapped here. You're here because you chose to intervene in matters you don't understand. Then help me understand them. Alessio regarded me with measured consideration, as if weighing the risks of sharing information against the potential benefits of my cooperation. The notebook contains financial records, he finally said. Accounts, investments, transfers, information that could be problematic in the wrong hands, like the police? A cold smile. Among others. And someone wanted it badly enough to try to kill you for it? The notebook is merely a symptom of a larger problem. He moved to the bar and poured himself a drink. Someone in my organization has been skimming profits, laundering money through unauthorized channels. The notebook provides proof and names. The casual way he discussed criminal activity made my head spin. This was a world completely foreign to me, operating by its own set of rules and consequences. So it was an inside job, I said, putting the pieces together. Someone close to you. He inclined his head slightly. It appears so. And now that person knows I saved you. They know I exist. Yes. No sugarcoating, no false reassurances. Just the stark truth. Before I could process the implications, the elevator chimed. Alessio's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, relaxing only when one of his men stepped out, followed by a woman carrying a tray of food. They set up lunch on a glass dining table with a view of the city skyline. The woman, different from Elena, younger with a perpetually downcast gaze, arranged plates of grilled fish, roasted vegetables, and crusty bread with the efficiency of someone who'd performed this task many times before. When they departed, Alessio gestured for me to sit, eat. We have matters to discuss. The food was exquisite, but I barely tasted it. My mind was too busy calculating scenarios, trying to find a path out of this situation that didn't end with me dead or permanently entangled with a criminal organization. You said I saved your life, I began carefully. That creates a debt. Alessio's eyes narrowed slightly. It does. Then repay it by letting me go. Give me enough money to start over somewhere new. I won't go to the police. I won't tell anyone what happened. I'll disappear. He studied me over the rim of his wine glass. And where would you go, Lena? Back to another coffee shop in another city? Another anonymous existence where you're neither happy nor truly alive? The accuracy of his assessment stung. That's not your concern. It became my concern when you put your life at risk for mine. He set down his glass. Besides, disappearing is not as simple as you might think. Not in today's world. Not from the kind of people who would hunt you. I've done it before, I said before I could stop myself. Interest flickered in his dark eyes. Have you? From whom were you hiding, I wonder? I looked away. Not hiding. Just starting over after your mother's death. My eyes snapped back to his. Don't talk about her. Something softened in his expression. Not pity, but recognition. I lost my father when I was 22. The world expects you to move on after a suitable period of mourning. They don't understand that grief becomes a part of you, that you carry it forever. The unexpected vulnerability caught me off guard. I searched his face for signs of manipulation, but found only sincerity. How did he die? I asked quietly, much like someone tried to arrange for me today. A car bomb. His voice remained steady, but I saw the tension in his jaw. I was supposed to be with him. A last-minute change of plans kept me at the office. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. It was a long time ago. He reached for his wine again, but it taught me a valuable lesson about loyalty and betrayal, about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. Is that what I am now? A friend or an enemy? That depends entirely on you. His gaze held mine, intense and uncompromising. But I'm inclined to consider someone who risked their life for mine as at least a potential ally. And if I don't want to be your ally, if I just want my old life back? Your old life is gone, Lena. The moment you interfered, you entered my world. The question now is not whether you can leave, but how you will navigate within it. The finality in his tone sent a chill through me. So I am a prisoner. You are under my protection, he corrected. A distinction you'll come to appreciate once you understand the alternatives. Before I could argue further, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. Excuse me, he said, standing. I need to take this. He moved to the far side of the room, speaking rapidly in Italian. Though I couldn't understand the words, the tension in his voice was unmistakable. I took the opportunity to approach the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city below. From this height, everything looked ordered, peaceful. Cars moved along the streets like toys. People reduced to mere specks. It was hard to believe that somewhere down there, the remains of a destroyed Mercedes were still smoking. That someone had tried to commit murder in broad daylight. That my life, as I knew it, had ended. Alessio's reflection appeared beside mine in the glass. Beautiful view, isn't it? This city has been my family's for generations. People aren't property, I said. Cities don't belong to anyone. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. A philosophical perspective, but not a practical one. Everything belongs to someone, Lena. The question is simply, who has the power to claim it? I turned to face him. And what are you claiming now? Me? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. I don't claim people. I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. No? He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in its intensity. You saved my life. In some cultures, that creates a bond more binding than blood. My heart hammered against my ribs. But I held my ground. In my culture, it would earn me a thank you, and maybe a gift basket, not imprisonment. To my surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features. You are remarkable, Lena Reyes. Most people would be too terrified to speak to me this way. Maybe I haven't fully processed the danger yet. Or maybe you've faced worse fears than me. His expression grew serious again. That call was from my security team. They've identified the shooter. My breath caught. Who? Someone connected to the Barisi family, old rivals of mine. He watched my reaction carefully. They also found evidence that suggests information was leaked from within my organization. Someone provided your coffee shop's location, my schedule, the exact vehicle I would be using. So it was an inside job, like you suspected. He nodded grimly. Which means I can't trust anyone until I identify the traitor. Except me, I said, the realization dawning. Because I'm the only person who's definitively proven I don't want you dead. The corner of his mouth twitched, precisely. The irony wasn't lost on me. My impulsive act of heroism had made me the one person this dangerous man could trust in a sea of potential betrayers. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait. My men are tracking down leads. In the meantime, you stay here where it's safe. For how long? As long as necessary. The vague timeline sent a wave of panic through me. I can't just disappear. I have rent due next week. A job. Both easily handled. He waved a dismissive hand. Your apartment has been paid for the next 3 months. Your employer has been informed you had a family emergency and won't be returning. I stared at him, incredulous. You did all that without asking me? Would you have preferred I left loose ends that could lead back to you? To us? His gaze intensified. The people who want me dead wouldn't hesitate to use you to get to me. They need to believe you've vanished. The reality of my situation crashed down on me with renewed force. This wasn't a temporary inconvenience. This was my life now, at least until Alessio found who had betrayed him and neutralized the threat. I turned back to the window, fighting the urge to scream or cry or both. I need some air. To my surprise, he nodded. The terrace is through those doors. It's secure. 27 floors up with access only through this penthouse. You'll be safe there. I moved toward the glass doors he indicated, desperate for space to think, to breathe. As I reached for the handle, his hand closed gently around my wrist. Lena. His voice was softer now, almost gentle. I know this is difficult, but I promise you, I will keep you safe. Our eyes met, and something unspoken passed between us. An understanding, perhaps, or a recognition of our shared circumstances. Both of us caught in a dangerous game, both at risk, both depending on the other in ways neither had anticipated. I don't want your protection, I said quietly. I want my freedom. In this situation, they're one and the same. He released my wrist. Without one, you cannot have the other. The terrace was spacious, wrapping around 2 sides of the penthouse. The early afternoon sun warmed the elegant outdoor furniture and potted citrus trees. In another context, it would have been paradise. I leaned against the railing, letting the breeze cool my flushed cheeks. Far below, the city continued its rhythmic pulse, oblivious to my personal catastrophe. Sirens wailed in the distance, perhaps still responding to the explosion that had altered the course of my life hours earlier. The sound of the door sliding open announced Alessio's presence before I saw him. He joined me at the railing, his shoulder nearly touching mine as we gazed out at the skyline together. My father used to say that from up here. You can see the patterns, he said quietly. The flow of the city, the movement of power, things invisible from the ground become clear. And what patterns do you see now? I asked, glancing at his profile. His jaw tightened. Betrayal. Ambition. The familiar dance of those who think they can take what isn't theirs. Including me? He turned to face me fully then, his expression unreadable. You are something else entirely, Lena. An anomaly, a variable I didn't account for. Is that good or bad? I haven't decided yet. His honesty was strangely refreshing. But I'm inclined to believe that someone who would risk their life for a stranger isn't my enemy. Not your enemy, I conceded. But not your possession either. Something flashed in his eyes, approval, perhaps, or respect. Fair enough. Then let's establish some parameters for our arrangement. You stay here, under my protection, until the immediate threat is neutralized. In return, I'll ensure your safety and comfort, and when this is over, provide you with the resources to rebuild your life wherever you choose. It wasn't freedom, not really, but it was better than being treated as a prisoner or a pawn. And if the immediate threat takes months to neutralize, years, then we'll reassess. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But I assure you, Lena, I don't intend to let this situation drag on. The people who betrayed me, who endangered you, will be dealt with swiftly. The cold certainty in his voice sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder of exactly who I was dealing with. Not just a powerful businessman, but a man accustomed to dispensing his own brand of justice. I want your word, I said, meeting his gaze steadily, that when this is over, you'll let me go. No strings attached. Alessio studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. Then, with deliberate movement, he extended his hand. You have my word, Lena Reyes. I hesitated only briefly before placing my hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, the calluses on his palm a surprising contrast to his refined appearance. Then I guess we have a deal, I said, trying to ignore the electric current that seemed to flow between us at the contact. His thumb traced a small circle on the back of my hand before he released it. Indeed we do. As I turned back to the view, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a bargain with forces I didn't fully understand. But what choice did I have? My old life was gone, shattered like the windows of Alessio's Mercedes. All I could do now was navigate this new reality, and hope I emerged from it intact. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. Alessio disappeared into his office for hours, engaged in hushed phone calls and video conferences. Occasionally, men in suits arrived in the elevator, conferred with him briefly, and departed just as quickly. I was left largely to my own devices, exploring the penthouse with its tasteful art and expensive furnishings. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages, a media room with a screen that took up an entire wall, a gym with state-of-the-art equipment overlooking the city. It was a beautiful prison, but a prison nonetheless. By evening, I had read half a novel from the library, taken another shower, and changed into more comfortable clothes that had mysteriously appeared in my room, a spacious guest suite with its own bathroom and a view of the sunset. I was standing on the terrace, watching the sky bleed from orange to purple, when Alessio joined me again. "Are you hungry?" he asked, his voice startling me from my thoughts. I turned to find him changed from his formal suit into dark slacks and a gray cashmere sweater that softened his appearance somewhat. It was disarming to see him look almost normal, almost approachable. "I could eat," I admitted. "Good, dinner will be served shortly." He moved to stand beside me at the railing. "How are you finding your accommodations?" The formality of the question almost made me laugh. "The thread count is definitely higher than at my apartment." A ghost of a smile. "I'll take that as approval. It's a beautiful place," I conceded. "Just not where I'd choose to be. Few of us end up where we'd choose," he replied, his gaze on the darkening horizon. "Life has a way of redirecting our paths when we least expect it." There was something almost philosophical in his tone that caught my attention. "Is that how you ended up doing what you do? Redirection?" He glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. "You mean, did I dream of becoming a Mafia boss as a child? I studied economics at university, had ambitions of legitimate business. What changed? My father's murder." He said it matter-of-factly, but I could sense the old pain beneath the words. Someone had to take his place, maintain order, protect what he'd built. And that someone had to be you? I was the eldest son. It was my responsibility. His jaw tightened, and I was determined to find those responsible for his death. "Did you?" I asked quietly. A cold smile. "Eventually." The simple word contained volumes, a story of revenge, of violence, of justice served outside the bounds of law. I suppressed a shiver. "And now someone's trying to do the same to you," I observed. "The cycle continues." He turned to face me fully, but I intend to break it this time. Before I could respond, the glass door slid open, and Elena appeared. "Dinner is served, sir." The dining table had been set elegantly, fine china, crystal glasses, silver candlesticks casting a warm glow. The meal itself was simple, but perfectly prepared. Pasta with seafood, fresh bread, a salad of bitter greens. A bottle of white wine stood open, breathing. Alessio pulled out my chair for me, an oddly gentlemanly gesture from a man who admitted to ordering executions. "Your staff lives here?" I asked, as he seated himself across from me. "Elena and Antonio have an apartment 1 floor down. Others come and go as needed." He poured wine for both of us. "They've been with me for many years, loyal." "You hope?" I said before I could stop myself. His eyes met mine, sharp with interest. "Indeed. Trust must be continually earned and verified in my position. That sounds exhausting. It's necessary." He took a sip of his wine, though I admit there's a certain relief in having one person I don't need to question. It took me a moment to realize he meant me. "Because I saved your life. Because you had no reason to save my life except basic human decency." He studied me over the rim of his glass. A rare commodity in my experience. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was delicious. but I found it hard to enjoy with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. "Have you made any progress?" I finally asked. "Finding who betrayed you?" Alessio's expression darkened slightly. "We've narrowed the possibilities. The information in that notebook was known to only 5 people besides myself. 3 have alibis for when it disappeared. That leaves 2. And the shooter? The Barisi family you mentioned? Hired help. A professional." His hand tightened around his fork. "The real question is who hired him, and how they knew my schedule." "Someone close to you," I concluded. "Someone who knew you'd be at the coffee shop." He nodded grimly. "Someone who knows my habits, my movements, someone I trusted." The betrayal in his voice was palpable, and despite everything, I felt a surge of empathy. To have your trust violated so completely, to know that someone close to you wanted you dead. It was a terrible kind of loneliness. "What will you do when you find them?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. His eyes met mine, cold and certain. "What is necessary?" I swallowed hard. "You'll kill them. I'll ensure they can never threaten me or mine again." He set down his cutlery with deliberate precision. "Does that disturb you? Shouldn't it? You're talking about murder." "I'm talking about justice, about survival." He leaned forward slightly. "In your world, Lena, there are police and courts and laws to protect you. In mine, I am the law. My family's survival depends on swift, decisive action against those who would destroy us. That doesn't make it right. Perhaps not by conventional morality. But tell me," his voice softened, became almost intimate, "if you had the person who tried to kill me, who put you in danger, sitting here now, would you truly want them to walk away unpunished?" The question unsettled me, because I wasn't entirely sure of my answer. The person who had targeted Alessio had also irrevocably changed my life, had put me in the crosshairs of a danger I never asked for. "I wouldn't want them dead," I said finally, "but I wouldn't want them free either." He nodded, as if my answer satisfied him. "Then we agree on the principle, if not the method." The conversation shifted then, to lighter topics. Alessio asked about my studies, my interest in literature. I found myself explaining my love of Russian novels, of stories about people facing impossible moral choices. He was surprisingly knowledgeable, debating plot points of books I'd studied in college with the ease of someone who'd read them multiple times. It was disconcerting, this glimpse of the man beneath the power and violence, the educated, thoughtful person who might have had a very different life if not for the redirection he'd spoken of earlier. After dinner, we moved to the living area where Elena had set up coffee and small glasses of amber liqueur. "Nocino," Alessio explained, seeing my questioning look. "Walnut liqueur, my grandmother's recipe." I took a small sip, letting the complex flavors of nuts, spices, and caramelized sugar bloom on my tongue. "It's delicious. One of the few traditions I maintain from my childhood." There was a softness to his expression now, the fortress of his guard lowered slightly by good food and conversation. "What was it like?" I asked. "Growing up in this world?" He considered the question, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Privileged in many ways. We never wanted for anything material. But there were other costs. Constant vigilance, limited friendships, the knowledge from an early age that our family was different, set apart. Lonely, I suggested. His eyes met mine, a flash of recognition in their dark depths. Yes, though I didn't recognize it as loneliness until much later. It was simply our normal. I thought of my own childhood, a single mother working multiple jobs, a small apartment above a laundromat, secondhand clothes and discount groceries. Different circumstances entirely, yet I recognized the isolation he described. After my father died, he continued, the loneliness took a different form, the isolation of leadership, of being the one who makes the difficult decisions, who bears the consequences. Is that why you never married? The question slipped out before I could consider its appropriateness. Rather than being offended, he seemed amused. Observant of you to notice the absence of a wife. But no, that was a choice. In my position, attachments are vulnerabilities. Potential leverage for enemies. That sounds like a convenient excuse for avoiding commitment. He laughed, the sound rich and unexpectedly warm. Perhaps it is. Or perhaps I simply never met someone worth the risk. His eyes held mine for a beat too long, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I looked away first, taking another sip of the nocino to hide my discomfort. "And you?" he asked. "No significant attachments in your life?" "No," I said simply. "Not for a long time." By choice or circumstance, I considered the question, surprising myself with my honesty. After my mom died, I just couldn't handle the thought of losing anyone else. It was easier to keep people at a distance. "Ah." There was no pity in his voice, just understanding. The preemptive strike against grief. I'm familiar with the strategy. "Does it work for you?" I asked. "About as well as it seems to work for you." A wry smile, which is to say, it ensured survival, but not much else. The conversation was veering into territory that felt too intimate, too revealing. I set down my empty glass and stood. "I think I need some sleep," I said. "It's been a long day." Alessio rose as well, impeccable manners even in this strange circumstance. "Of course. We both should rest. Tomorrow may bring developments." As I turned to go, he spoke again. "Lena." His voice was softer now, almost gentle. "I know this situation is far from ideal. But I want you to know that you are genuinely safe here. No one will harm you under my protection." I looked back at him, this dangerous, complex man who held my future in his hands. "It's not just physical safety people need, Alessio. We need freedom too." Something flashed in his eyes. Respect, perhaps. "Freedom is relative. We all have our cages, visible or invisible. Some cages have keys," I replied. "Indeed they do." He inclined his head slightly. "And when the time is right, I will give you yours. You have my word." I nodded, not entirely convinced but too tired to argue further. "Good night, then." "Sleep well, Lena." In my room, I changed into the silk pajamas that had been provided and slid between sheets that probably cost more than a month's rent at my apartment. Despite the luxury surrounding me, sleep was elusive. My mind kept replaying the day's events. The explosion, the fear, the strange dinner conversation with a man who spoke of murder and Russian literature with equal eloquence. I must have drifted off eventually, because a sound woke me. A soft thud followed by voices, too distant to make out words but urgent in tone. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Slipping out of bed, I moved to the door and opened it just enough to peer into the darkened hallway. Light spilled from the living area, along with the murmur of tense conversation. I hesitated, debating whether to investigate or return to bed. Curiosity won out. I padded silently down the hallway, careful to stay in the shadows. In the living room, Alessio stood with two of his men, examining something spread across the coffee table. His back was to me, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid set of his spine. "Confirmed it was him," one of the men was saying. "We found the evidence in his home safe, exactly where the information said it would be." "And he's secure?" Alessio's voice was cold, controlled. "Yes, sir. At the warehouse location. No one followed." Alessio nodded once. "I'll deal with him personally. No one else is to speak with him." "Understood, sir." "And the Barisi connection?" "Confirmed as well. Phone records show 5 calls in the past week." Alessio was silent for a moment, his hand clenching and unclenching at his side. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "I want to know everything, every detail, every motivation. And then I want this finished, cleanly and permanently. No loose ends." The men nodded in unison. "Sir," the taller one ventured, "what about the woman? She's a complication." My breath caught in my throat. "Ms. Reyes is under my personal protection," Alessio replied, his tone brooking no argument. "She is not to be discussed with anyone outside this room. As far as the organization is concerned, she doesn't exist. But sir, if Baresi knows about her, then I will deal with Baresi next." Alessio turned slightly, his profile harsh in the low light. "The woman saved my life. She is now my responsibility. Anyone who questions that answers to me personally. Is that clear?" Both men murmured their agreement. "Good, now go. I'll join you at the warehouse within the hour." As the men moved toward the elevator, I retreated quickly down the hallway, my heart pounding. I slipped back into my room just as I heard the elevator doors open and close. I sat on the edge of the bed, processing what I'd overheard. They had found the traitor, and Alessio was going to deal with him personally. I had no illusions about what that meant. Should I be relieved that this nightmare might soon be over, or horrified that I was entangled with a man capable of such cold-blooded justice? Before I could decide, a soft knock sounded at my door. I froze, uncertain whether to acknowledge the knock or pretend to be asleep. After a moment's hesitation, I rose and moved to the door, opening it to find Alessio standing in the dimly lit hallway. He had changed back into a suit, his expression grave. "You were listening," he said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I saw no point in denying it. "Yes." He nodded once, unsurprised. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, allowing him to enter the room. He remained standing, his posture tense but controlled. "You found the person who betrayed you," I said. "Yes." His voice was flat. "Marco Vannucci, my financial advisor for the past 8 years. A man I trusted with my family's legacy." The name meant nothing to me, but the betrayal behind it clearly cut deep. "And you're going to kill him." Alessio met my gaze directly. "I'm going to question him first, learn the full extent of his betrayal, who else might be involved. And then, yes, he will face consequences for his actions." "Consequences," I repeated, the euphemism hanging between us. "You mean execution. I mean justice," he corrected. "The man arranged to have me killed. He endangered countless innocent lives, including yours. In any system of law, such actions would merit the most severe punishment." "But you're not any system of law," I countered. "You're one man deciding another man's fate." Something hardened in his expression. "That's the world I live in, Lena. The world you glimpsed when you pushed me out of the path of a bullet." We stood in silence for a moment, the gulf between our moral universes seemingly unbridgeable. And yet, despite everything, I found I could understand his position, even if I couldn't fully accept it. "Will it end there?" I asked quietly. "With this Marco person? No. The Baresi family provided resources, protection. They too must understand the consequences of moving against me." His jaw tightened. "But after that, yes, this particular threat should be neutralized. And then I can go." His eyes softened slightly. "That was our agreement. Once the danger has passed, you'll be free to leave, with resources to rebuild your life wherever you choose." I searched his face, looking for deception and finding none. "You're really going to let me walk away?" "I gave you my word." A pause. "Though I admit, the prospect is less appealing than I initially thought it would be." The implication in his words, the hint of reluctance in his voice, sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. I pushed the feeling aside. "When will you be back?" I asked, changing the subject. "By morning, most likely. Antonio and Elena will remain in the building. You'll be safe here." I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. "I guess I'll see you tomorrow, then." Alessio hesitated, seeming on the verge of saying something more. Instead, he reached out slowly, as if giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Try to rest," he said softly. "This will all be over soon." After he left, I returned to bed but found sleep impossible. I lay awake watching the minutes tick by on the digital clock, thinking about life and death and the moral gray areas that existed between them, about justice and vengeance and where one became the other, and about Alessio Vitale, a man who inhabited a world so different from my own, and yet who, in some strange way, seemed to understand me better than anyone had in years. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows. The clock read 9:43 a.m. I showered and dressed in more of the clothes that had been provided for me, jeans and a simple blouse that somehow fit perfectly. When I emerged from my room, the penthouse was quiet. In the kitchen, I found a note propped against a coffee pot, still keeping its contents warm. Matters took longer than anticipated. Help yourself to breakfast. Will return by noon. AV. I poured myself coffee and found pastries in a covered dish on the counter. As I ate, I wandered to the windows, gazing out at the city bathed in morning light. Somewhere out there, a man had probably spent his last night alive. Somewhere out there, Alessio had dispensed his version of justice. And soon, I would be free to return to that world below, albeit with a very different perspective than I'd had before. I was still standing at the window when the elevator chimed. I turned, expecting to see Alessio, but instead 3 men I didn't recognize stepped into the penthouse. They wore suits similar to Alessio's security team, but something about their movements set off alarm bells in my mind. "Ms. Reyes?" the lead man asked, his accent thick. I took a step back. "Who are you? Where's Alessio? Mr. Vitale sent us to move you to a more secure location." He reached inside his jacket. Instinct took over. I grabbed the heavy glass coffee pot and hurled it at him, then bolted for the terrace doors. Behind me, I heard shouts and the unmistakable sound of a gun being drawn from a holster. I burst onto the terrace, frantically looking for an escape route. 27 floors up, there was nowhere to go. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, hoping to ambush whoever came through. The first man appeared in the doorway, gun raised. I swung a potted plant at his head with all my strength. It connected with a satisfying crack, and he staggered. I shoved past him, back into the penthouse, only to find the other 2 men waiting. "Don't make this difficult," one said, training his weapon on me. "Alessio will kill you for this," I warned, backing away. The man smiled coldly. "Vitale won't be killing anyone, not after what happened at the warehouse." Fear clutched at my heart. "What do you mean? What happened?" "Let's just say the hunter became the hunted." He gestured with his gun. "Now come with us quietly, or this gets messy." My mind raced. If something had happened to Alessio, these men could be from the Barisi family, which meant my chances of surviving once I left this penthouse were virtually 0. "Okay," I said, raising my hands in surrender. "Just don't hurt me, please." The men relaxed slightly, one lowering his gun. That was their mistake. I grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the bar beside me and hurled it at the light fixtures above them. Glass shattered, raining down. In the momentary distraction, I darted for Alessio's office, slamming and locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I searched desperately for a weapon, a phone, anything. The desk drawers were locked. I tried the computer, but it required a password. Outside, the men were shouting, one of them beginning to ram against the door. It wouldn't hold for long. My gaze fell on a framed photograph. Alessio standing beside an older woman, both dressed in black. His mother, perhaps. I grabbed it and smashed it against the desk, using a shard of glass to pry open the bottom drawer. Inside was a handgun. I had never fired a gun in my life, but I'd watched enough crime shows to understand the basics. I checked that it was loaded, flipped off the safety, and aimed it at the door just as it splintered open. "Stop right there," I shouted, trying to keep my hands steady. "I know how to use this." The men froze, eyeing the weapon. The lead intruder held up his hands placatingly. "Easy now. This is a misunderstanding." "Is it? Because it sounds like you've done something to Alessio, and now you're here to clean up loose ends, meaning me." A tense smile. "Ms. Reyes, you're jumping to conclusions. Mr. Vitale is fine. We're simply following orders to move you to—" The sound of the elevator interrupted him. All of us turned toward the living room as footsteps approached. Multiple sets, moving quickly. "Lena." Alessio's voice, urgent and concerned. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by confusion. If Alessio was here, who were these men? The answer came in the form of gunfire. The lead intruder whirled, drawing his weapon as Alessio and 2 of his security team entered the office doorway. What followed was chaos. I dropped to the floor as bullets flew overhead. Glass shattered, wood splintered. Someone shouted in Italian. A body fell heavily beside me. One of the intruders, blood blooming across his chest. And then, silence. "Lena?" Alessio's voice again, closer now. "Are you hurt?" I looked up to find him kneeling beside me, his own gun still in hand, his expression a mixture of concern and tightly controlled rage. Behind him, his men were checking the bodies of the intruders. "I'm okay," I managed, my voice shaking. "I thought... They said you were... dead?" He helped me to my feet, his hand steady around mine, a premature assumption on the Barisi's part. What happened at the warehouse? His jaw tightened. An ambush. Marco wasn't working alone. His cousin is married to Baresi's daughter. They tried to eliminate both of us in one move. His eyes darkened. They failed. I didn't ask for details. The grim satisfaction in his voice told me everything I needed to know about the fate of Marco Vannucci and whoever had been waiting at the warehouse. And these men? I gestured to the bodies being dragged from the office by Alessio's security. Baresi's. A desperate final play. He holstered his gun and touched my face gently. I'm sorry you were put in danger. I shouldn't have left you. The tenderness in his touch was at odds with the violence he had just enacted, the lives he had taken. Yet in that moment, the contradiction didn't disturb me as much as it should have. I found your gun, I said, somewhat inanely. A smile touched his lips. I saw. You were holding it correctly. Impressive for someone who's never fired one. I watch a lot of TV, he laughed. A genuine sound that seemed to release some of the tension from both of us. Then his expression grew serious again. It's over now, truly. The Baresi threat has been neutralized. Marco and his conspirators are gone. You're safe. The implications of his words sank in. So I can leave. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or resignation. That was our agreement. Once the danger passed, you would be free to go, with resources to start over. I should have felt relieved. This was what I had wanted from the beginning. My freedom, my life back. Yet, as I stood there in Alessio's office, the adrenaline of the attack still coursing through my veins, I realized that the prospect of leaving felt hollow. The woman who had pushed a stranger to the ground seconds before a car exploded no longer existed. That impulsive, lonely coffee shop worker had been replaced by someone else. Someone who had glimpsed a different world, who had faced death and survived, who had connected with a man as complex and contradictory as Alessio Vitale. And if I don't want to leave, the words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise him. His eyes widened slightly. Lena, you don't know what you're saying. My world is dangerous, violent. It's no place for someone like you. Someone like me? I challenged. You mean someone who risks her life for others? Someone who fights when cornered? Someone who understands loneliness and loss? He stepped closer, his gaze intense. You deserve better than this life. Maybe I deserve the right to choose my own life, I countered. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible, of hiding from connections because I'm afraid of loss. Maybe I want something real, even if it's complicated. Alessio searched my face, looking for uncertainty or fear, and finding none. Slowly, he raised a hand to cup my cheek. What are you proposing exactly? He asked, his voice low. I don't know, I admitted. Not exactly. Just not goodbye, not yet. A small smile curved his lips. Not yet, he agreed. His hand slid to the nape of my neck, drawing me closer. I went willingly, my own hands finding the solid warmth of his chest. When our lips met, it felt both inevitable and surprising, a culmination and a beginning. The kiss deepened, his arms encircling me completely, mine winding around his neck. In that moment, all the contradictions seemed to make sense. The violence and the tenderness, the danger and the protection, the freedom and the choice. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Alessio rested his forehead against mine. You understand, he said softly, that this won't be simple. That being with me comes with complications, with risk. I pushed a Mafia boss to the ground seconds before a car exploded, I reminded him, a smile tugging at my lips. I think I've proven I can handle complications. He laughed, the sound warming me from the inside out. Indeed you have. His expression grew serious again. I can't promise you a normal life, Lena, but I can promise to protect you, to value you, to never take for granted what you've given me. And what's that? A second chance, he said simply. At life, at connection, at something I thought wasn't possible for someone like me. Outside the shattered windows of the penthouse, the city continued its eternal rhythm. Somewhere below, people were going about their ordinary lives, unaware of the violence and passion that had unfolded 27 floors above them. I had been one of those people just days ago. Invisible, alone, existing, rather than living. Now I stood in the arms of a dangerous, complex man who had shown me both the darkest and most compelling aspects of human nature. A man who had seen me, truly seen me, perhaps for the first time in years. So, Alessio murmured against my hair, what happens now? I leaned back to meet his gaze, finding in it a reflection of my own certainty. Now we write our own story. His smile, warm and genuine and just for me, was answer enough. In that moment, I knew that the car explosion hadn't just saved his life. In its own way, it had saved mine too. By shoving Alessio Vitale to the ground that day, I had fallen into a new existence. One filled with danger, yes, but also with passion, purpose, and the kind of connection I had been running from for too long. It wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't safe or predictable or ordinary. It was better.